in Brian's place. So welcome everyone. We've got a great presentation for everyone today. Super excited to have Celeste present to us. It's a great preview. I think you guys will really enjoy it. And as Brian always likes to tell everyone, next month we have another Lunch and Learn scheduled. It's called Managing Remote and Distributed Teams. Our presenter will be George Freeman, who is a project management professional who I believe he's an architect with Canon. So that should be great. And that's on January 12th. All right, well, I don't really have anything else to share at this time. I know Brian usually also talks about the evening event coming up in January, but we don't have that one scheduled just yet. It's January 26th if you want to put it on your calendar. And then as soon as we have information, we'll let you know. All right, well, without further ado, Celeste, I'm going to go ahead and turn my webcam off and my mic off, and I'm going to turn this over to you. Thanks so much for being our presenter today.
Absolutely. Well, welcome everyone. I am Celeste Richardson. I am a global enterprise business agility strategist currently with Micron technology. And really what that means is I am focused on organizational change and new ways of working. So really working with our senior leadership in our organizational design, our portfolio strategy, and really understanding how it impacts the teams that do the work. In the middle of all that is that project or program management layer. So that's what we're going to talk about today, is what happens when you're really rooted in traditional project management methods, but you're trying to move to a culture of agility and lean practices. So really, they gave a teaser title, are Agile and Waterfall friends or foes? So when you look at this picture here, what are you really seeing? So this is where my role becomes really important, and those that are also organizational change agents, is many of us tend to focus on the fight right here in the middle, where the two bulls are duking it out and really trying to say one is better than the other. The reality is, if you look outside of the two bulls fighting, there's an ecosystem there. And in order for anything to be successful, our ecosystem also has to thrive. So consider that as we go through this presentation. Think about the culture and the ecosystem that you're currently engaged with, and not so much about the methods or practices that folks think are better than the other. So the true example is, yes, they can coexist, but they may not coexist in a traditional way, or maybe the way a purist may approach it. And this is why understanding our ecosystem is so important. So here they're living in a different area than the previous two bulls were, but they have a thriving ecosystem, and so that way they can all coexist. But how we get there is a little bit different depending on where you're at, whether it's in your journey, in your role, or your organization's journey too, as they change the way that they're working today. So really, there's a lot of misconceptions. We talk about Agile and we talk about Waterfall, and really we're talking about two different things. Agile is really culture, and it's focused on valuing people. So everyone that's in that organization, not numbers, not headcount, not resources. These are people, and we all matter. We all come from different backgrounds. We all have different experiences, and we're really what help an organization thrive. And then, of course, we can't do what we do if we don't have someone that we're serving. So it focuses on people and customers over profits or output. That's really what we're valuing when we're valuing a culture of agility. So, think about, how does your organizational culture align? Do you have shared beliefs? Do you have unwritten rules? And what does that look like? And what does it feel like when you log in every day or you come into the office every day? Is it valuing you? Is it valuing your coworkers? And is it ultimately serving that customer? There's a lot of information here, not intended for us to read it right now, but I wanted to leave that with you. So when we talk about, friend or foe, waterfall versus agile, we're really talking about the different cultures. Now, waterfall culture has evolved. It typically has been rooted in very traditional hierarchy-driven cultures and companies. And, back in the industrial age, that was a way of working and it was successful. In the digital age, we've evolved and we can't take the same approaches that we used to in the past. Interestingly enough, waterfall, the creators of the waterfall methodology, they actually never intended for it to be one and done. It was intended to actually be iterative. So you went through different cycles and repeated those until you reached the outcome. Somewhere along the corporate journey that ended, but it doesn't have to. Whereas more lean and agile cultures are really about being adaptive, people first, being innovative, first to market. You have to be quick. And in order to be quick, you have to operate differently. So that's why they're really not competing with one another. It really is about what does that company need to do to thrive? And in some cases, very traditional methods may still apply. Where in many cases, probably in a lot of our Valley's corporations, we need to have a culture of agility to be successful and to be here a few years from now and be competitive in the marketplace. So our first poll question, just so I know how to better serve all of you, what world do you work in today? So is the role that you're in, the company you work for, are you more of a traditional project manager, have a traditional culture, but you have teams that you're serving that have pivoted to navigating and operating in a culture of agility? Or are you a traditional project manager still working in a traditional project team format? Or maybe you're even more into the program manager space and your company's culture is really rooted in lean and agile methods? Or are you a scrum master, a team agility lead, some type of team coach? Or do you not function in any of those roles? So let's just take a moment and go ahead and answer the first poll question.
So Celeste, we do have some votes coming in. We have about 39 attendees, and so far we've got about 13 votes in. Majority is traditional PM working in with traditional teams at 56%. We are getting some uptick though on the traditional PM navigating teams operating in culture of agility. That's 5 votes. So far, majority is still traditional PM, traditional project teams. 1 vote for program manager. 5 votes for other.
Great.
So let's see, what do we have? 21, 26 votes in. Let's give it just another few seconds here. See if we get any more votes. Okay, looks like things are slowing down, so let's go ahead and we'll take a look at the results. So it looks like the winner, if you will, with the most votes is traditional PM with traditional project teams at 53.6% or 15 votes. And then next you've got a tie between other at 21.4% and the traditional PM navigating teams operating in culture of agility with 6 votes. And we have 1 vote for program manager. Companies' cultures rooted in lean and agile.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right. So let's talk a little bit about what that means then to your role. So again, a lot of the us versus them type just stigma out there really comes from Google. Google's a wonderful tool, but anybody can put information out there. And so there's also of certifications and education that's available, which is wonderful. But as humans, we tend to, take a 2-day course and feel like we have all the knowledge that we need. The reality is our world is very complex. And so with that complexity, requires experience and learning lots of different organizational patterns or cultural patterns to really understand how to apply what you've learned. So it's not that they're intending to give bad information, it's just that's where they're at in their journey. So those are the things that they know. So it starts to pit things against each other. Also, again, waterfall methods were intended to do multiple times, and over the course of how things have gone, they've tend to only cycle once. So it just shows you that they really are in lockstep, because that approach is going to feel very familiar in the coming slides. And then also Agile culture gets confused with frameworks. So the buzzwords that are out there in our industry, the Scrum framework, SAFe, which is just a scaling framework. There are lots of frameworks. In fact, I think last count that I've seen, there's about 270 types of frameworks that you can select from. And it's what works best for your company. But how you leverage the culture and build your organizational design and your values, that's where things become very, very important. So how do we navigate in these two worlds where we're rooted maybe in more traditional hierarchy-driven organizational culture, but we're shifting into more lean and agile culture, and the two tend to collide at the level of project management and where projects are really started. And that's where you'll hear your team saying, well, that's not how we work. And you have your executive saying, well, I have this fixed date, get it done by then. So where do we go? So let's talk a little bit about planning and the roles and where you can start, especially for those of you that are in very traditional cultures and you're still doing traditional project management. If you know that there's an opportunity within your company to excel and provide additional value to your customers, you can start shifting the culture as a project or program manager. So let's talk about how you plan projects. So again, another poll. This is a really interesting topic because there can be companies that are really deeply rooted in lean and agile culture, but they're still funding and doing traditional project management. Again, it's not a right or wrong, just understanding where you're at today. So how do you plan projects within your company? Very traditional, it's set on a schedule, scope, budget, big upfront design and planning. Do you still do traditional project management, but you're not doing full upfront planning? You're actually doing it from a quarterly slice or batch size perspective? Or you're not project focused at all, you're funding value streams and you're outcome driven, or the last option is just a completely different method. So we'll take a moment here.
Okay, so let's see. We are at the second one. How does company plan projects? Got it. All right, so we are getting votes in. Looks like the lead is the first one, traditional project management, set schedule, scope, budget, big upfront design planning at 63% or 12 votes. Next one is the traditional project management quarterly schedule with 6 votes. Not project focused, focused on funding value is 2 votes, and other is 3 votes. So I wonder what the other is. That's got 3 votes. And now we're at 13 votes with traditional. Let's see, what is that? 19, 21, 24 out of 38 folks. Give them just another few seconds. Folks are still voting. Good. Okay, looks like Slowed down. All right. So still in the lead is the traditional project management at 14 votes. That's with setting schedule, scope, budget up front. Then the second place is traditional project management quarterly schedule at 6 votes. And then you have a tie between not project focus on funding, value streams at 3 votes, and other at 3 votes.
Great. So if you are actually funding value streams in your company, the 3 of you that answered that, congratulations. That is typically the hardest leap for an organization to make. And if it's a startup, obviously the complexity there is very different. But these big companies in the Valley that many of us work for, the financial shift is typically the hardest because they're used to a budgeting process. Now, this is where things tend to collide, and our executives really want to focus on specific scope, schedule, and budget. And our teams are saying, we want to be able to do our work iteratively, or you've got product owners saying we need to do this iteratively so we can get feedback. So we can look at how do you start to marry the two. And then also, if you are just working in a traditional environment and that's working for you, consider what I'm about to share as maybe an opportunity to help your company improve in increasing their customer satisfaction or increasing their people happiness, because we're looking at it with a different lens rather than focused on understanding at the end. So this is what it looks like typically from a traditional standpoint. It doesn't apply to everyone, but when we talk about traditional project management, we're looking at gathering all those requirements up front, doing the design, implementation, the testing, we deploy it, and then we tend to maintain it. It's got a start and an end. And for the most part, we tend to not get our feedback until we're in the testing phase, some cases in the deployment phase. And this is not just software development related. This could be a marketing campaign. This could be any type of tangible product. So this really applies to any type of project management work. And so when we think of the world we live in today, we are moving faster than most of us can keep up with. There's, the metaverse is coming. That's the next thing that we're all going to be in this virtual world, which should be interesting. Think back, not too long ago where texting was new. We are just moving at a rapid rate. So in that environment, if feedback is critical, if you're waiting till the end, that's where there's waste. Somebody can meet you to the marketplace. There's all sorts of challenges here, where if we're taking more of a culture of agility, what we're valuing is the customer and the people. And so here we're taking this big project schedule that could be 6 months, it could be multiple years. And instead we're coming in and saying, knowing that this is a multi-year project, first, let's start with the first quarter. What is it we need to achieve there? And then once we understand what the outcome is for that quarter, we're going to want to forecast a few quarters out as well, but they're just our best guess at this time. We're not committing to them. We're just really understanding what our next steps are. Once we have that quarter defined, we're going to break it into monthly batch sizes. This allows us to have focus factor and be able to really go back and check, does it satisfy this? And as we work through the months, did we learn something new? Do we need to discuss, maybe our objective is not the same now? It gives us this kind of bounce back and forth to check and double check and keep checking to make sure we're focused on the right thing at the right time. And then once we get those monthly batch sizes, we're not committing to all 3 months of the quarter. We're going to focus on committing to the current quarter. We're going to learn in that quarter, and then we're going to forecast out the next 2. And you're going to just continually incorporate that feedback so you know that you're focused on the right thing next month, and then you're focused on the right thing the following month to overarching achieve this quarter. Your teams that are going to do the work, they're going to be much more successful because they've got more focus factor, and they're focused on what do we need to accomplish this month versus what do we need to accomplish over a course of 3 years. So it allows them to really get down to their planning cycles, whether they have a 3-day planning cycle to where they're working in 3-day time boxes, or they have a 3-week time box. These teams can come together and help to achieve that monthly batch size. And because we're doing this in these cycles, we get feedback very quickly. And then we incorporate that feedback and we go all the way back again. And so this model is a rinse and repeat in these smaller batch sizes, enabling us to satisfy our customers, keep our people happy, and focus on the right things at the right time. So that's really the difference that we're talking about here from the roles. Now, don't get hung up on the terminology of the roles. Every company has different titles and the different terminology that they like to use. But really what we're looking at here is, who's helping to determine what it is we need to go after from a customer-centric standpoint, who's in charge of that vision. And so when we look at these, we're really trying to focus on that planning cycle. So in a culture of agility, it's continuous. We're focused on our current quarter. We are dissecting that into those monthly batch sizes. And then whether you choose to approach it with user stories or requirements or technical specs, however the company determines that, it's breaking it down into those bite-sized chunks for those teams to consume. But we're focused on just this quarter, and then we're forecasting out the next quarter, forecasting out the future quarter, and this last quarter out here, we're just really putting some ideas on a page. They won't really become a reality from a commitment standpoint until they're on deck. So this is the difference, and this is, if you're again seated in really traditional project management, this is still possible for you. When you look at these types of milestones that you're setting, you can really look back and say, how can we focus on this from a quarterly perspective so that way we know where we need to be? How do we focus on getting feedback sooner? And this will also prevent you from getting down here and saying, we need 6 months more from a schedule perspective. We had, these bottlenecks, or we learned these new responsible for setting that vision. And this gets back to the ecosystem. They're responsible for keeping the system healthy. So if we go back to our elk, they really, need that healthy ecosystem where they've got food, they've got shelter, they've got water. This is where our executive team is really critical, giving us, that vision and leading the herd, so that way we know what we're all set out to do and why it's important to our company and our customers. The why is really critical in us being, having some skin in the game and taking pride in our work. Seeing what that outcome is and how it makes a difference really helps to motivate individuals. And then leaders, traditional cultures have managers who are very task-driven, or they're firefighters. And in a culture of agility, you're really looking at growing people, helping to protect them so they have capacity to learn new tools, be innovative, and really enable that people growth. So there's strategic leaders, and they're really in charge of people growing and enabling that. So they're really important to have a seat at. And when we're determining that quarterly outcome of that project flow, protecting that time too. New technology could come out, in that quarter. And it's important that we know that our teams have the time to learn that new technology, because they may need to incorporate it into the next quarter. Again, rather than waiting until the end of the project and having to go back in and maybe redo some work because of that new technology coming out. And then really the critical layer here is that program product management layer. This is where the project team leaders get involved and really help to determine those feature packages. So here we're really setting the vision for the whole quarter. And this could be multiple projects coming together. When we get down to this program management, product management layer, we're really trying to determine what do we need to focus on this month to gather a team of teams together and deliver that package. And the example I like to use a lot is Amazon. They've got a little bit of everything. But if I'm a customer and maybe I want some dog food, I need some drinks, and I need a shirt, that's going to go to different teams potentially, or different bins, and it's all going to get packaged. It's going to be checked to make sure that all of my order is in there, and it's going to be shipped to me. So what we're really doing here is we're creating a shippable package that you're potentially going to ship off to that customer. And with the Amazon example, you may need to wait for another item to come in. So you're going to hold my box until that other item comes in and ship it. This happens at this layer too. So being very knowledgeable around the product or capability of that feature package is really critical. And that's where our project management expertise can really thrive in partnering with that business in creating that vision for that month. And then helping work with those teams that are doing the work. So if you have individuals working on this, they're probably collaborating with other folks. So they're a team in a sense, or they're part of the project team. If you're working with, a Scrum team or a team that's more flow-based, there's work flowing to that team. And so these two layers need to be connected. And that's where it's a great opportunity for project management roles to thrive and bring the two together as a liaison. So planning is really critical here if you're wanting to shift your culture. Quarterly outcomes, take that whole project and slice it down into a quarterly batch size. Forecast out your next couple quarters. Get your right people in the room and really cast that vision and have them share it. And then break it down into those monthly batch sizes so it can be consumed by the folks doing the work. And then that way they've got a signal that they can read and know, and they also know what's coming in that forecast. And this is what it looks like, in a sense, a little bit smaller than reality, depending on the type of work you're doing. But the idea here is we know where we're going. This is our map. Here's where we're all headed to achieve this common goal. And it could be a project outcome, or it could be simply a quarterly outcome for a specific product or capability. But there's a vision set there. And with that vision, we also know what it means to be successful. So that gives us our stop. And then it gets broken down into these monthly batch sizes. So it could take hundreds of feature packages to deliver this quarterly outcome. It could take 20 feature packages to deliver that quarterly outcome. But we've got our signal here of what we're set out to achieve. And then we've got our monthly signals here. And then this is where it flows down to the folks that are doing that work. So whether you're taking a requirements approach of writing user stories and more role-based type work, wonderful. If you're doing more traditional requirement gathering, that works just as well too. But the signal is coming from those feature packages to say, here's the small slice of the problem we're set out to solve for, or the new capability that we're working towards. And then this is how we're going to break it down. And we're going to get feedback on it, deliver that to see if it meets our hypothesis, and continue to deliver more requirements and more user stories until our hypothesis has been met. So the breaking down of batch sizes is very critical here to get that quick feedback know we're working on the right thing at the right time, and allowing us to pivot if needed. So this is the layer here that really has the most opportunity in our industry. We tend to have great executives that come to the table and they're excited and they're championing what needs to be done. We've got teams down here that are at the ready. They want to get the work done. But when we're in this middle layer, bringing the right business folks to the table that know that specific need in depth and can really check on it and help us understand it, with the project side of it of, hey, we've got this monthly due date together, bringing those individuals to the table and helping to derive that is very, very critical. So again, it's not one versus another. This really comes down to shifting culture. So feedback, focus on people, focus on your customer base. And so these are some things that you can really do to get started shifting your role of what it is today traditionally, which is the majority of you, or how you can enhance it if you're on this journey within your company. So there isn't Agile terms here. This is cultural terms that we're really focused on in improving our organizations. So the first one I've talked a lot about. This is just the critical piece. Think about something that was handed off to you that you felt like you were going to boil the ocean. And where do I get started? Well, where you get started is really batch sizes. If you or even want to clean your house, and maybe you've got a 5,000 square foot house and it just seems daunting to go clean that all in a day, you can batch size it. Do 1 or 2 rooms a day and, get everything done on your list in that day and then move on to the next. At the end of your week, you've achieved your outcome that you needed to do. So batch sizes are really important to give us focus factor and also to satisfy our customers. So by moving away from those 3-year project plans, which are still there, and backing into them from a batch size perspective is going to give you clarity. It's going to give the executives clarity, especially if you need to change the date or maybe the scope changes because the market's changed. It gives you that upfront transparency that you wouldn't have if you got to the end and tested and found out the needs aren't met. So batch sizes is one place that you can take actionable change today to start looking at success for the future. And if quarterly batch sizes seem like, gosh, those are too small, maybe do 6 months, for a 3-year project. Start there. You don't have to start so small that it's too much change. The next step is really on a feedback perspective. So this is really critical. Project managers are so great at, looking at that lessons learned at the end of the project. They grab all that information. They have great discussion on it. In some cases, we actually use it again, which is fantastic. That's the intent. Sometimes we file it away. And it's reminded when it happens again, but we tend to not take action on it. In a culture of agility, what we're really looking at are those continuous feedback cycles. So shifting from that one and done lessons learned or that testing at the end of the project to in that monthly batch cycle, are we testing? Are we checking our hypothesis against what we're expecting? What are our customers telling us? And learning that feedback now rather than 2 years from now. And really talking to the folks that are involved. So you're talking to your feature teams and finding out what's working. Are we planning effectively? Are we forecasting effectively? And really understanding the ecosystem so you know that you're on a healthy path forward. And if you're not, or there's an opportunity to even get better at what you're doing, you're incorporating that feedback immediately into your next time box. And this is a continuous cycle. And this is where it tends to get a little nerve-wracking for some, because they say, well, our scope, we have to stick to our scope. The scope was known when the original project was chartered. The market may have changed. So now your scope may not fit its original intent. This gives you that feedback loop immediately to take to the decision makers if needed, and make those adjustments, again, to satisfy your customer, which also satisfies the people that are working on it. And it prevents waste in the system. No one likes to get to the end of a project and go, gosh, we only needed 20% of that because of all the changes that have happened to our company or our customers. This keeps you in that rhythm to make those adjustments on time and make them transparent. And then shifting from fixed dates. This is tough. So in a traditional project sense, we've got a date that we're set on. Some companies are a little bit more flexible with those than others. But again, this goes back to those batch sizes. So if you are operating in a fixed date type of environment, that's okay. Back into it. Break that into quarters and back into those quarters. And then again, start with the current quarter and break it down into those monthly batch sizes. And then pretty soon, a couple quarters of getting to done there, you'll have a better pattern to know, is that fixed date that we all kind of guessed, is that still feasible? Do we need to make any adjustments? Let's talk to the sponsors now and let them know, here's how we're trending, and we need 6 months additional to achieve everything that you're asking for. Or best case scenario, you have found that you don't need everything that maybe you thought based on the feedback you've received, and maybe you're going to end earlier, and it does happen. So it's just a mindset shift to say, okay, we do have this fixed date, but we're going to back into it differently. We're going to batch size differently, and we're going to keep information at the forefront much sooner so those decisions can be made and things can be transparent. No surprises at the end is the goal. And the next actionable change that any company can make, no matter how you're operating, is really enabling a learning culture. Going back to where we're at as a world, COVID's really taught all of us a lot in how to be adaptable. We've probably learned some things about ourselves that we didn't know and we may like, or maybe they're not our favorite traits now. But the reality is we've all had to shift and we've had to learn. I've learned a new tool working with Cheryl on days where you could wait and learn something when you got to it. You really have to set yourself up for success and really challenge who you are individually and as a company. So the market is changing. We're seeing that every day, where some of these companies that have been around for generations are no longer, because someone has brought something new that's more innovative, customer centric, and has the adaptability to grow and keep up with what their customers need.
Hey, Celeste, this is Cheryl. I'm just going to interrupt for just a quick second. So I think we had a bit of a hiccup. Your screen froze for just a second, and now I'm not seeing you or your slide deck.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, let me stop sharing and reshare.
Okay, awesome.
How's that?
Perfect. Your webcam isn't showing you, but we're definitely seeing your presentation. And so that's awesome. That's
okay, wonderful.
That's okay. Thank you.
Talking about adaptability.
Right? In real time.
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome. Love it.
So the learning culture piece too is really important to protect. It's not unusual for me to work with companies, and I come from a consulting background too, so I've been fortunate to work with a lot of global companies, and I can tell you the chief complaint from a team member perspective or a team perspective is they don't have time. And from a company perspective and a personal perspective, we have to protect that time, or we are putting our company at risk, we're putting our product at risk, and our customers are going to move on to something that's more appealing. So this is really important, and this is where, from a project management, program management perspective, I think you really have some influence here when you're looking at, what is it going to take from a timeline perspective? What is it going to take from a scope perspective? Ensuring that you're having the conversation to carve out that capacity. So as new things are learned, as new technology comes out, or just even as new techniques are available to your people, they have time to learn them and actually have time to apply them and grow. So a really important part of the culture today. And then celebrating the wins and the learning. We're going to fail. That's good. We want to celebrate that failure. Now, if we're repeating it multiple times over, that's a different conversation. And this is where, shifting the culture is really important. We invest in doing lessons learned. We invest in doing retrospectives. But if we don't apply that learning, are we setting ourselves up for success? And if you know that your team members are going to be out in October because you have a culture that are outdoorsmen or outdoors women and they want to go hunting, then we should be planning for that capacity rather than always every October knowing, hey, we're going to have a lot of our folks out and our project is going to then be at risk because we're going to fall behind on our anticipated timeline. Those are patterns that we need to look at and we need to learn from, and we need to apply that learning and make it actionable. So celebrating those failures of, hey, we learned this is a pattern, we need to make sure to put it to the forefront, so critical. Same with, turnover. The marketplace right now is incredible. If you're looking at transitioning into program management or even being a team coach, the market is your friend right now. It's pretty amazing. Well, what does that impact look like to your project? What does it look like to the program? And are we looking at those patterns of new team members coming on board or team members leaving with a lot of really knowledge, and how is that going to impact us? We should know where we're at there, all the way down to just simple things of this system goes down on the 5th of every month, and are we planning for that? So celebrate knowing that and really create that culture of failure is a positive win for us, and bring it to the forefront, make it transparent. Now, when it happens over and over again and we're not changing it, that's where, we need to have something more actionable, and we need to really work with our people leaders to help create that environment so we don't repeat those patterns. And at the same time, celebrate those wins. You're going to get quick victories very early on just by moving to smaller batch sizes. And so you want to celebrate that. You're going to want to make that very transparent. As you shift the culture, it's uncomfortable. And there's going to be things that everyone's going to trip on, or there's going to be things that leaders are going to ask for, and you're not going to be able to share them the same way they've always seen them. So once they finally understand that we're changing and we're changing for the better, celebrate that. Reinforce those wins, so then that way it helps to shift the culture. So with these few things that I've shared with you on, some ideas that you can start taking action on today, is there anything here that you actually could or would want to start with? Would you want to shift the culture to more people and customer focused? Maybe you're very hierarchy driven, and just that little shift could make a big difference. Or, could you start shifting from traditional project management just by starting to plan in smaller batch sizes and really backing into that project plan to start to shift that culture? Moving from fixed dates and scopes to really outcome focused, to where you still have maybe a fixed project plan, but because you're changing to outcomes, you're going to wow your sponsors, because you might get done early, and hopefully you will, because you're focused on the right things. Or really none of these apply to you. Your company isn't open to it, or this just isn't your forte. So we'll take a moment here for the last poll question.
Okay, it looks like we've got folks who are voting. Awesome. 1622, we have 24 votes in right now out of 38 attendees. People are definitely still rapidly voting, so we'll give them just another few seconds here. So far, looks like the big win, additional project management planning to smaller batch sizes at 12 votes. And then just under is shifting the culture to people and customer focused at 8 votes. And then shift from fixed dates scope to outcome focused, 7 votes. And 2 votes for none of these. My company isn't open to new ways of working. Well, bummer. That's kind of sad, huh? Come on. It's always good to think outside the box, yeah?
Well, and for those that did select that, there are government agencies.
True.
There's different companies where the way that they operate,
Mm-hmm.
they're very much fixed. However, I can tell you, in consulting for some of the government agencies, we're getting better.
Right.
And so there's always an opportunity. So the challenge really there is, looking to see, are they serving whoever that customer is, whether it's internal or external, in a way that is going to set them up for success long term. And that's really driving that cultural conversation. They may not realize there's a different way to do things. And so, you can really be the evangelist there to just start, changing the focus. Let's focus on our customer and getting feedback from them. Let's hear them and incorporate that feedback into how you operate. There's little things that we can do without changing the way that projects operate to get us started.
Agreed. So it looks like folks voting, and it didn't change in terms of order. So shift from traditional project management planning to smaller batch sizes is the big winner at 43.3%, 13 votes. And then next you have shifting the culture to people and customer focused at 26.7%, 8 votes. And then shift from fixed dates scope to outcome focused, which is 23.3% at 7 votes.
Great.
So yeah. In the curve there almost, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Interesting. Mm-hmm.
So really the takeaway here, think ecosystem. Sometimes we get so focused on the task at hand, we forget the impact that it's having around us. So, look at the culture, look at the value of people, look at the value of customer. I think every company says we value our people, but do they? When you're at work or you log on, do you feel valued as a person, or do you feel valued as a resource? One quick thing you can start shifting as a project manager, or in that similar role, is stop talking about resource management. Start talking about people or teams. Changing your terminology is a really great step into the next phase of culture. And the reason that shift is really important is resources are things like your desk, your computer, your printer. We're individuals. We are people, and we're complex, and we all have different needs. So just changing that terminology, watch how the reaction is. And it's hard because we're really deeply rooted in resource management. Start talking about, people and capacity and see what that does. The customer feedback. There is a company that's a global company that has a local office here. They require all of their team members to sit on the customer service line and listen. It's part of, I think they have to do it weekly for a few minutes, but it gives them that direct connection to what customers are saying. Whether they're excited, whether they're upset, whether they have a feature request, they're hearing it firsthand from the voice of the customer. Now, we typically all can't go that far, but how are you collecting your customers' feedback? Who are you sharing it with? And is it going down to the right level of folks? Truly, everybody should hear what their customers are saying. And feedback is really a gift. Sometimes it hurts a little, but if you take that and you spin it into something that you can create action on and improve, the better we are for it. And then smaller batch sizes. This is a very complex topic, and I know I've talked about it at a broad scale. So, if you're really interested in taking that next step, I do some mentoring outside when I have the time. So, reach out to me. I have my contact information on the next slide, and, I'm happy to give you some tips or, send you some industry resources that you can get started on. It's a game changer. And every company that I have consulted for, this is the journey I take them on first, because it helps to really change the lens of how they're operating. And it gives huge relief to the teams that are feeling overloaded by the amount of work coming to them. So smaller batch size is a wonderful way to start. And there's so many different ways that you can get started with that. So again, here's my contact information. So if you want to reach out to me, here's a few different resources. You can email me, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I do have an Instagram, which I've been poor at posting on lately, but I'll try to do better there. And then you can always text me too. I'm happy to help and even get you connected with some industry experts if you've got a specific area that you're focused on.
Celeste, great presentation. Thank you so much for offering to help our attendees kind of move to that next level and getting closer to agility. I really personally loved the incremental steps and just changing some of the vernacular, right? Changing some of the words that we use to describe. I mean, just changing resources to people, like you said, it personalizes it. People relate to that. They're like, oh, I'm now a person, not a number, or an unknown entity or something like that. I love that. That's great. And it's small changes, right? Baby steps.
Baby steps. That's the important.
Awesome. Well, if anyone has any questions, we have a little bit of time. If you could put them in the Q&A tab, that would be great. So we'll look for those. Just a quick few seconds, see if anyone has any questions for Celeste that she can answer. And if not, then 'tis the season to end meetings early and continue thinking about the holiday season, right? Looks like Foster's got, thank you, Celeste. I don't know if you're reading the chats or not. And Matthew. Matthew did suggest, is the smaller batch sizes concept related to visualizing work via the goal?
It's very close. It really depends on the approach for the company. So it's hard to answer specifically without knowing your organization. But if you think of more of an outcome-driven approach, not output, what is it that the problem that we're trying to solve for this quarter, or the new product or capability that we need to bring to market this quarter? And then how do we break that down? It focuses on controlling the work in progress. And so that's a really important part of that batch size approach as well.
Matthew says, thank you. Ideas presented.
For having me.
Yeah. Yes, it was, again, great information. I think that really bridges the gap. And I think to your point, they're not friends or foes or frenemies, right? It's hand in glove, right? It's both. So everyone's saying great. Thank you for the great presentation, good information. I don't see any other questions presented. Just really helpful. Thank you, Susan, and thanks so much for spending an hour with us and all the prep work it took to put this together. Much appreciated.
Thank you all. Have a happy holiday.
All right. Take care.